Oh, and then I could talk about the Sierra games, because then I got into Leisure Suit Larry. That was my first sexual experience, watching 8-bit characters have sex under a black rectangle. My first console I remember playing was the Atari 2600. It was given to us as a holiday present, I remember. And I remember playing Pitfall. I remember Pitfall very specifically. And I remember my brother saying, like, wow, look at the graphics, which is insane now when you look at the Pitfall graphics on the Atari 2600 compared to what's happening today. But I remember loving Pitfall. I think that really got me addicted to the console game system for the first time. And we played everything. We had baseball. We had, I'm trying to think of the main ones we played. But then I moved on to ColecoVision, which was a huge step up, and Smurfs on ColecoVision was I don't know if anyone's told you about Smurfs yet on ColecoVision, but that was the one I got addicted to on ColecoVision. That's the one I remember most. And yeah, it had a weird dial thing, and I remember that. And James Bond, there was a James Bond game that we played a lot. And then I got...
anything on Intellivision?
I never had Intellivision. I saw people that had Intellivision. That's the one that had the numbered keypad. I remember that. We skipped over. My parents skipped over Intellivision. I don't know if what our financial times were during the Intellivision period, but you know, they were so good at marketing kids. You know, they would just everything we watched would be covered with the new system. And then I remember. Nintendo, the first Nintendo with the robot came out. What was that technically called?
NES.
Yeah, I remember when NES came out, and it had the robot, which I never could figure out what I was supposed to do with the robot. It looked really cool, but I never really figured out how to incorporate it. But I was totally addicted to that. I should also mention, before game systems, I was really into arcade games. So my favorites were Spy Hunter and 720. We had when my parents got divorced, my dad moved into an apartment building, and there was small and there wasn't really much to do, but across the street was a sub shop, a Blimpies. And I would hang out in the Blimpies and play whatever video game they had. And it would be filled with kids. It was back in the day when kids would really gather someplace to play an arcade game, and everyone would gather around whatever the one game this little Blimpie shop had was. And I remember for a long time it was 720, the skateboard game. Skate or die! And I just loved it. I was addicted to it. I wasn't very good at it at all. And I would you'd line up your quarters on the machine for your turn to play. And the older kids would hog it for hours because they would be so incredible, and they'd have their quarters stacked up high. So I would go later when all the other kids were gone and play alone by myself at the Blimpie shop. There was also an early driving game that had really kind of advanced graphics, and it was the first one that had like the radio playing. You could select the radio station, and the steering wheel shook. It was like Flying Over California or something, like Cruising California or something like that. That was another one they had. And also Gauntlet. I loved Gauntlet. Warrior needs food badly. Do not shoot other players yet. And I never got to the point where you could shoot other players because I wasn't good enough to get past the yet. And then I'm trying to think, what happened after NES?
Anything on Sega, Sonic, and all?
Oh, I had Genesis, yeah, Sonic the Hedgehog, and.
How would you compare Sonic to Mario?
Oh, Super Mario Brothers too. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say because Super Mario Brothers was sort of like the biggest video game I remember as a kid. I mean, there was nothing bigger than Super Mario Brothers. You probably know the stats. It has to be one of the top-selling games of all time. It was so, in my childhood, it was so pervasive. It was just everyone played it. I was really into Metroid too. That was one that I was really addicted to. And then I went through a time when computer games first started, we didn't have a very advanced computer. We had like an MS-DOS IBM computer, and I had word games. And it was my first time. I mean, it's crazy to think when you look at video games today that I was literally a kid typing in like, there was no graphics, it was just words like, open the door. You cannot open that door. Move forward to the next door. That was like, because the computer we had at home was not very advanced, and that's all I could get it was like choose your own adventure word games, but it was kind of cool because you used your imagination, and it was kind of like combining a choose your own adventure book with a computer program. And then I got exposed to the Sierra games, and then I was totally addicted to those. Leisure Suit Larry, I was way too young to be playing Leisure Suit Larry, but it was like my first encounter with anything sexual, 8-bit characters trying to have sex. And even when they did finally have sex, it was under a black bar that said censored. It went up and down as they supposedly had sex. Such a ripoff. But I love Leisure Suit Larry, and that whole idea of the way the Sierra games worked really was addicting to me. A Police Quest was that whole series I got super into. I loved those games. I started getting into college and not being as into gaming as I was as a kid. I never really played. I played Halo a bit. I was on a movie called The Last Kiss, and we were all in Montreal. This is in my 20s, and right when Halo was really popular. And we didn't play the one where we played that mode where you can just all go in one room and shoot at each other. We never played the game. We played against each other in a room, and that was a ton of fun. That's like my most recent gaming experience as an adult. Because we were 4 guys, and you could do 4 split screens and fight each other, and we would do that during all our downtime, and that was a lot of fun. It was like paintball. Or when we were kids, we used to go to a place in Jersey called Photon, which was essentially Jersey laser tag. I have a funny memory. It's my Leisure Suit Larry memory with playing with my parents, believe it or not. It was completely inappropriate at the time, I guess, but my parents didn't really know, and I didn't really know. We were at a friend's house in Vermont when we first were introduced to the Sierra games, and it was a friend of my parents, and he was an adult who was totally into the Sierra games, and so he was showing all 3 of us, how the game was played. And my parents, I've never played video games ever with my parents, but they thought it was hilarious, obviously, because it was adult themed, and so that was a funny memory, like sitting there in this like ski cabin in Vermont, playing Leisure Suit Larry with my parents. I must have been like 12 years old. I remember we're trying to figure out how to buy rubbers at the convenience store. You don't have to go very far to find that the stereotype of gamers isn't really true. There's all types of people that are gamers. In fact, I remember the actress Mila Kunis, who's been called the sexiest person on earth in a couple magazines these days, telling me how addicted she was to World of Warcraft. Gaming is an escape like movies and television and reading are for other people. It's a new medium. People that really love these worlds, they disappear into these worlds. I mean, some of these advanced games now, like World of Warcraft and these games that people are playing online, are a way for people to interact in ways they never could. They can role play and kind of disappear into a fantasy world. So for those people out there who love going to the movies and seeing a fantasy movie for 2 hours or lately 3 hours, these are people who figured out that they can go into a world and become a character and interact with people from all over the globe within this world. And I think that that's really exciting for people. There's people who are very shy and would never have the courage to go out and be fully themselves in their everyday lives, but find that courage to be this character in a game. And I think that's wonderful. Like anything in the world, people can do things too much and become hermits. But so I'm sure that people who are so hardcore have to fight walking away from their computer sometimes. But I think it's really great. I think it gives people an outlet and an expression and allows them to disappear into worlds that we would never get to imagine in real life, and gets people to role play and to become something that they're not, and to have interactions that they wouldn't normally have. I think it's definitely art. I mean, look at the artistry that's involved in modern day games, and the reality that's created. And I can tell you just from knowing concept artists that draw for video games, the amazing talents that they have. In fact, they often are the same people who are doing movies these days. As the graphics have gotten so amazing, I think there's more room for people to see it as art. Because it always felt, when it was 8-bit or whatever, it didn't look like art. And now you look at it and you look at these, these beautiful landscapes and realities and worlds that are created. And there's plenty of times where you see something and think, wow, that would be a beautiful painting on my wall. More and more these days, technology and art are intermingling. I just got to visit a place where they make a lot of the fancy costumes for superheroes, and you walk in and there's sculptors in there sculpting maquettes, and then they had scanner dots on them, and so it was the perfect hybrid of like a sculptor literally sculpting clay, and then they would scan the maquette, and then they could manipulate the maquette in the computer that they had just scanned. So I just had this experience like, wow, and then they're going to eventually make molds and make costumes out of it. And so there's an example of traditional art and technology coming together. And I think it's nowhere is it more obvious than in video games. You have these artists creating these beautiful three-dimensional worlds, and the technology allowing players to come into those worlds and have them be as real as possible is the ultimate example of art and science working together. I didn't, as a kid, think that gaming would become what it has become. No, I thought, we were just kids playing the 2600, 8-bit cheesy graphics. I mean, I never would have daydreamed that gaming would become the industry and the culture that it is today. But it makes sense. I mean, you mentioned the holodeck. I mean, when we were kids watching, I was watching Star Trek: The Next Generation, thinking, wow, I wonder if there'll ever be a holodeck. And we're pretty close these days. And in the next 10 years, God only knows what it will become. I mean, where do you go from here other than being in a fully realized room? A virtual reality game room with, I picture like Princess Leia being projected by R2-D2, but you're interacting with a projection like that. Like when they brought back, what was it, Tupac they brought back? The Tupac hologram? Yeah, like the Tupac hologram. You could be playing games with the Tupac hologram. I mean, you could just be walking around your living room. I don't know, you put 4 sensors around the room and you put your special virtual reality glasses on, and you could be walking around these worlds. I mean, I don't see how that's far away. That just seems like it's inevitable. And that's really cool to think about with movies. I mean, if one day you could be standing in the room of the scene taking place. So you're in your living room and the scene's happening, but it looks like it's happening over on the other side of the room. I mean, that's kind of a trippy thing to think about. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the gaming industry outsold the movie industry. And you can put a giant chyron underneath me. That's not true if it's not, but I'm pretty sure it is. I can still remember some of the music. Bow, 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 bow.